They say every great secret begins with a door, one that was never meant to open for ordinary eyes. In the heart of Vatican City, beneath the sunlight that dances across St. Peter's Square, stand the ancient bronze doors that guard the entrance to a world few have ever seen. Tourists pass them without understanding what lies beyond, whispering about miracles and saints, while the true marvel, the true enigma, hides behind layers of stone, protocol, and centuries of silence. For most people, the Vatican is a symbol of divine truth, a beacon of spiritual certainty. Yet its greatest mysteries do not sit beneath cathedral domes or within painted chapels. They rest underground, deep inside climate-sealed vaults, locked behind fortified corridors that only a select handful are permitted to enter. It is here, far from the public halls and ceremonial chambers, that the Vatican Library reveals its shadowed face. Not the reading room scholars photograph, but the hidden archives said to stretch for miles. Corridors where the dust of forgotten centuries sleeps undisturbed. Rooms rumored to contain manuscripts that could unsettle the foundations of faith itself. This contrast is impossible to ignore, an institution built on the promise of truth, shielding documents the world has never been allowed to witness. And so a question emerges, soft yet unsettling. Why guard knowledge so tightly unless that knowledge possesses the power to transform everything we believe we know? Stories drift through history like candle smoke, tales of forbidden books sealed in iron chests, prophecies too dangerous to speak aloud, and records from civilizations that should not have existed. Some whisper that within these vaults lie accounts of events that contradict the accepted timeline of humanity, evidence of ancient intelligence or celestial intervention. Others claim the archives protect writings that could fracture religious unity or unravel the narratives that millions hold sacred. Whether myth or truth, the mystery endures because the doors remain closed. And as we stand before this threshold, we feel the weight of all that is hidden, knowledge preserved, protected, or perhaps imprisoned. Whatever lies within these forbidden corridors was deemed important enough to conceal for centuries. The only question that remains is simple, haunting, and irresistible. What secret could possibly justify such silence? For most people, the Vatican Library is nothing more than an immense scholarly archive, a treasure of ancient manuscripts preserved for academic study. Historians insist there is nothing mystical about it, nothing hidden beyond the ordinary needs of conservation and security. They describe it as a repository of fragile documents, guarded simply because time is unforgiving and history must be protected. And on the surface, this explanation feels reasonable, comforting even. After all, why should a library be anything more than a library? Yet the whispers refuse to fade, because beyond the polished image of scholarship lies a very different portrait, a fortress of forbidden history, a place where access is restricted not by curiosity but by privilege, rank, and silent approval. If the archives hold nothing extraordinary, why does the list of permitted visitors resemble a roster of the elite? Why the armored vaults carved into stone, the biometric checkpoints, the chambers sealed beneath layers of surveillance? Why do researchers speak of rooms they were led past but not allowed to enter, doors that remained locked even as they stood inches away? It is in this contrast between what we are told and what we sense that doubt begins to grow. A simple archive does not need this level of secrecy. A mere collection of old texts does not inspire generations of rumors about hidden corridors and unseen chambers. Something about the Vatican Library defies the ordinary narrative, leaving us to wonder whether the myth is more truthful than the official story. Long before modern nations carved their borders across maps, the foundations of the Vatican Library were already forming in shadows and scripture. Its earliest documents whisper from centuries when Europe was a patchwork of warring tribes, when kingdoms rose and crumbled before leaving even a footprint in recorded history. Within these pages lie fragments of a world that predates the familiar story told in classrooms, suggesting that the library's origins stretch back not just through time, but through eras of humanity that left little behind except memory and myth. Over generations, popes recognized the volatile power of certain writings, texts that questioned doctrine, contradicted official timelines, or described events too unsettling for public faith. Some were quietly sealed away, removed from circulation with a single decree that claimed to protect the Church, though many suspected the real purpose was to protect a narrative already in place. There were chronicles of vanished empires whose names never survived in mainstream history, accounts of cities swallowed by oceans, deserts, or something far stranger. Travelers and monks recorded encounters with cultures that seemed impossibly advanced, their knowledge dismissed later as exaggeration or allegory. Yet the documents remained hidden deeper with each passing century, tucked beside letters from witnesses who claimed to see celestial lights reshaping the sky or structures rising overnight with engineering that should not have existed. These writings became the quiet heartbeat of the archive, an unbroken thread of forbidden history stretching across continents and civilizations. Whenever a new discovery threatened established understanding, the Church acted swiftly. Some texts were catalogued publicly, but others vanished behind locked doors. The more disruptive the content, the deeper it was buried. In time, the library was no longer a collection of sacred knowledge. It became a vault for history that defied explanation, a sanctuary for stories the world was never meant to reconcile with accepted truth. And so it endures, a silent witness to epochs humanity barely remembers, holding within its sealed chambers the possibility that our past is far older, far stranger, and far more interconnected than the versions preserved in our official histories allow today. Rumors speak of a catalog hidden even deeper than the manuscripts themselves, a document known only as the secret index. Scholars deny its existence, yet the whispers persist, insisting that somewhere within the Vatican's labyrinth lies a list of texts whose titles alone are forbidden. This index, if real, would map the unseen architecture of the archive. Shelves of writings on angelic technologies described with unnerving precision. Accounts of civilizations wiped out long before the biblical flood, and testimonies from early Christian sects whose beliefs would have altered the trajectory of the Church. Some say the index includes banned gospels that paint a radically different portrait of the ancient world, narratives so disruptive they were sealed away before they could challenge emerging doctrine. The scale of what might be hidden becomes staggering. A single catalog capable of reshaping everything, from our understanding of human origins to the possibility that forgotten knowledge once elevated ancient societies to heights we no longer imagine. It is said that the index is updated each time a new discovery contradicts accepted history, ensuring that the most controversial truths remain out of public reach. Whether myth or misplaced hope, the idea of the secret index lingers because it suggests something monumental, that the Vatican's deepest vaults do not merely protect old paper but guard the untold chapters of humanity's story, kept 250. Somewhere deep within the Vatican's hidden vaults are said to rest the Gospels that history forgot, texts whispered about by scholars but never confirmed, writings attributed to disciples whose voices were quietly removed from the grand narrative of Christianity. These were not the polished accounts shaped generations later, but raw, intimate testimonies from those who walked beside Jesus, who interpreted his teachings through lenses far different from the doctrines that would eventually define the Church. According to rumor, some of these manuscripts describe a Messiah who spoke in metaphors so vast they transcended religion itself, offering glimpses into mysteries of creation, consciousness, and cosmic law. Others portray a teacher emphasizing inner awakening more than institutional authority, a message that might have threatened the growing structure of an organized church. And so the question lingers like a tremor beneath history. What if these lost gospels change the very story of Jesus? What if they reveal a depth that was never meant to be forgotten? Or contradictions that challenge everything built upon later interpretations? These possibilities stir a reverence mixed with unsettling intrigue, not because they diminish the sacred story, but because they might expand it beyond imagination, suggesting a spiritual lineage richer, stranger, and more intertwined with ancient wisdom traditions than the world has been allowed to consider. Whether preserved or silenced, these vanished gospels remain a shadowed doorway into a version of early Christianity that is both hauntingly familiar and radically new. If the lost Gospels stir curiosity, the rumored prophetic manuscripts hidden in the Vatican ignite something colder, an uneasy fascination. These texts, said to be penned by mystics, early saints, and unnamed seers, allegedly outline visions of timelines that unfold differently from our recorded past. Not predictions of simple events, but sweeping cosmic cycles, epochs of creation, destruction, and rebirth that span thousands of years. Some speak of celestial alignments that mark turning points in human consciousness. Others describe catastrophes that echo too closely our modern fears. Floods swallowing continents, stars falling like fire, kingdoms rising in impossible places. The chilling question is not whether these prophecies exist, but why they would be sealed away. Are these visions too frightening for the public, too destabilizing for faith, or perhaps too easily misunderstood? A prophecy can spark belief, but it can also spark panic, and panic in the wrong era has toppled civilizations. Yet the most unsettling idea is simpler. What if these manuscripts don't predict the future but remember it? What if they describe cycles humanity has lived through before, patterns we forget only to repeat again? Their silence, enforced or protective, leaves a void that only deepens the mystery. Among the strangest rumors surrounding the Vatican archives are tales of letters, simple pieces of correspondence that should not exist. Messages allegedly exchanged between historical figures who lived centuries apart, referencing events that had not yet occurred or technologies that should have been impossible for their time. Some describe philosophical debates across ages, as if time itself bent briefly to allow ideas to pass between minds separated by entire eras. These documents, if real, challenge the very structure of linear history. Are they evidence of mistaken chronology, misdated manuscripts, or something more enigmatic? Anomalies hinting at forgotten sciences or phenomena we no longer understand? Even scholars who dismiss such rumors admit that a single authentic example could unravel the historical timeline we rely on. Their mere possibility expands the mystery of the Vatican's deepest vaults. For if letters can exist outside their rightful century, what else might be hiding in those sealed corridors? What other distortions of time, memory, or human experience lie waiting in the dark? Deep in the sealed chambers of the Vatican, there are said to be manuscripts that describe a world unrecognizable to us. An earth before the deluge, before recorded history, before even the oldest temples of Egypt whispered their first prayers into the desert wind. According to legend, these documents speak of continents that no longer exist, entire land masses swallowed by oceans, and radiant cities whose brilliance rivaled the great empires of later ages. Not myths, not allegories, but detailed accounts written by travelers, priests, and chroniclers who claim to witness a civilization far older than anything found in official textbooks. Some of these texts reportedly contain maps drawn with impossible accuracy, depicting coastlines that modern satellite imagery would only reveal thousands of years later. Others describe cities built with architectural sophistication that defies the timeline of human development. Towering structures carved with mathematical perfection, adorned with symbols eerily similar to those found scattered across unrelated ancient cultures. And then there are the diaries, haunting testimonies from survivors of a cataclysmic age, recounting the moment oceans rose, skies darkened, and the world they knew collapsed into silence. Reading these accounts, if one were ever granted the privilege, would evoke not just awe, but dread, because they imply that humanity is not living in its first chapter, but in the fragments of a story told many times before, across cycles of creation and destruction that stretch beyond memory. They suggest that our species once possessed knowledge now forgotten, carried by civilizations erased long before the first pharaoh took his throne. And if such chronicles truly rest within the Vatican's vaults, locked away under layers of secrecy, then perhaps the greatest mystery is not what was lost, but why those who safeguarded these writings chose silence over revelation. Rumors echo through archaeological circles, not loudly but persistently, about strange artifacts that supposedly found their way into the Vatican's deepest vaults. Crystalline lenses polished with techniques modern opticians can barely replicate. Metallic spheres composed of alloys unknown to science. Devices that resemble primitive batteries yet possess energy signatures that no conventional dating method can explain. Each of these objects, if real, would shatter the established timeline of human development. Mainstream archaeology dismisses such claims as fantasy, insisting that ancient civilizations, however impressive, were limited by their era. But if that is true, why do these stories persist generation after generation? Why do whispers from within the Vatican speak of artifacts wrapped in linen, catalogued under obscure codes, sealed within oxygen-controlled chambers as if they were too important or too dangerous to discard? Some speculate that these items originated from pre-flood societies whose technological sophistication rivaled or even surpassed our own. Others believe they were preserved intentionally, safeguarded by early church figures who feared the chaos such discoveries might unleash. And then there is the possibility that these artifacts do not challenge history. They rewrite it entirely, forcing us to confront a past where human genius reached heights we can barely imagine today. If these vaults truly hold relics that defy their era, then perhaps the greatest question is not how they were made, but why the world isn't allowed to see them. Among the most unsettling rumors circulating about the Vatican's deepest vaults are documents describing encounters not with ordinary mortals, but with beings the Church has always referred to as angels. Yet the tone of these alleged writings is different from the poetic language of Scripture. These are not visions portrayed in metaphor or spiritual allegory. They read more like historical records, accounts by early scholars, desert mystics, or unnamed archivists who attempted to describe wonders their vocabulary struggled to contain. In these texts, angels are depicted not only as messengers of the divine but as bearers of knowledge. Mathematics, astronomy, healing techniques, and strange instruments that appear almost technological in nature. Crystalline rods that emitted light, tablets that displayed symbols without ink, objects that floated, hummed, or altered the state of matter. To the authors, these items were simply described through the lens available to them, miracles of heaven. But viewed through a modern perspective, the descriptions feel eerily precise, as if they hint at advanced devices mistaken for spiritual gifts. The Vatican, of course, interprets such accounts symbolically, emphasizing their theological meaning rather than their literal form. But silence surrounds certain manuscripts said to describe these encounters in greater detail. Too literal, too specific, too uncomfortably aligned with stories found far outside Christian tradition. Cultures separated by oceans spoke of luminous beings, winged or radiant, descending from the sky to instruct humanity. The overlap is impossible to ignore. Whether these entities were celestial, interdimensional, or simply misunderstood, the documents suggest that ancient humans may not have walked alone. And perhaps that is the secret the Church has chosen to hold quietly, guarding a truth that dissolves the boundaries between the spiritual and the unknown. If the angelic manuscripts blur the line between heaven and technology, the so-called extraterrestrial dossiers push that boundary into territory few dare to contemplate. According to persistent whispers, some of the Vatican's most restricted texts describe visitors from the sky, not in symbolic language, but with a clarity so stark it feels almost modern. Records of star people descending in radiant craft, metallic structures hovering like suns that never set, beings who communicated without speech and left behind inscriptions, still undeciphered today. What makes these rumors more chilling is their strange alignment with the Church's present-day interest in astrobiology. Over the last decade, high-ranking Vatican astronomers have openly discussed the possibility of intelligent life beyond Earth, even framing it as compatible with Christian doctrine. To the public, these statements appear progressive, thoughtful reflections on science and faith. But to those aware of the archive's darker legends, they sound like continuity, an echo of knowledge safeguarded for centuries. Some believe these dossiers include accounts passed down from civilizations that witnessed sky visitors long before the Church formed. Others claim early theologians documented unexplained phenomena with meticulous detail, fearful that such knowledge might fracture the fragile worldview of a developing faith. If true, the Vatican may hold not just fragments of extraterrestrial history, but insights into humanity's place within a much larger cosmic narrative. The escalation is undeniable. If the archives contain secrets not only of ancient Earth but of contact with minds beyond it, then the implications stretch far past theology. They challenge the origin story of our species, the limits of our science, and the assumption that humanity's journey has unfolded in isolation. And perhaps that is the greatest secret of all, that we are part of a story far bigger than we ever imagined. There are moments in history when knowledge ceases to be a beacon and becomes a threat, when ideas no longer illuminate but endanger the structures built to contain them. During the darker centuries of Europe, the Church stood as the central authority of both faith and intellect, guiding the spiritual rhythm of daily life. Yet beneath the hymns and the devotion, a quieter battle unfolded. A battle over who had the right to read, write, and question the nature of truth itself. In these eras, books were not merely objects. They were sparks capable of igniting revolutions of thought, and so the Church guarded them closely. Writings deemed dangerous were seized, copied into secret archives, or destroyed outright. Entire collections vanished in the glow of controlled fires. Curious scholars found themselves silenced, exiled, or worse. Ideas that challenged doctrine were buried not because they lacked substance, but because they possessed too much of it. The tension is striking. Publicly, the Church preached salvation through enlightenment. Privately, it enforced an iron boundary around the kind of enlightenment it considered safe. Records from this period describe monks quietly removing pages from manuscripts, scribes instructed to alter certain passages, and councils convened to decide which knowledge should survive and which should disappear into the depths of forbidden vaults. It was not merely heresy the Church feared. It was uncertainty. Anything that threatened the delicate architecture of faith, authority, or historical continuity became a liability. And so the library expanded not just with sacred texts, but with silenced voices, confiscated writings, and pieces of a world that was slowly being edited into a version deemed acceptable. Standing before this history, one cannot help but feel a mix of sorrow and fascination. What brilliance was lost? What questions went unanswered because they were never allowed to be asked? And how many truths still lie entombed beneath layers of suppression, waiting for the courage of a future generation to uncover them? Whispers persist about the most secret rooms of the Inquisition, chambers where not only confessions were extracted, but where knowledge itself was interrogated, dissected, and contained. These were the places where silence grew thick as stone, where candles burned low over manuscripts seized under suspicion of heresy. Some legends claim that within these rooms priests and scholars encountered writings so unsettling that they documented them only in coded margins before locking them away. Others speak of experiments carried out in desperate attempts to understand phenomena that defied doctrine, alchemical trials, strange mechanical devices, or accounts of visions that blurred the line between spiritual revelation and forbidden science. There are also rumors of testimonies recorded from individuals accused of possessing arcane knowledge, travelers who described lands that should not exist, scientists who theorized concepts far ahead of their time, mystics who spoke of forces the Church could neither verify nor dismiss. These confessions, often taken under duress, formed a chilling archive of ideas deemed too dangerous for humanity's collective mind. The tone of these tales is almost ghostly, as though the Inquisition's locked rooms were not merely sites of punishment, but thresholds into forgotten intellectual realms. Whether these accounts are true or embellished by time, they leave behind an eerie impression that the Church may have encountered truths it was unprepared to face, truths it chose to bury not out of malice but out of fear of what they might unravel. In the modern era, access to the Vatican's secret archives is framed as a privilege reserved for qualified scholars, historians, theologians, linguists with impeccable credentials. Yet even among this elite circle, there are stories whispered quietly, far from microphones and academic conferences. Accounts from archivists who claim they caught glimpses of things they were never meant to see. Scholars who describe the uneasy sensation of being guided, carefully, deliberately, through predetermined corridors, always watched, always nudged away from certain doors. One historian spoke anonymously of an incident during the 1970s. He was escorted to a reading room to examine medieval maps, but on the way, a staff member accidentally opened the wrong cabinet. For a moment, he saw scrolls written in languages he could not identify, scripts that looked older than anything he had studied. Before he could ask a question, the cabinet was slammed shut and the atmosphere shifted. The escort became tense, distant, and ushered him out as if something irreversible had occurred. Another account comes from a priest who worked as an archivist in the 1990s. He described entire hallways sealed behind metal grates, their lights permanently off. When he asked about them, a superior simply replied, "Those collections are not part of your vocation." The phrasing haunted him. Collections, plural. None of these witnesses claim to know what lies deeper within, but their stories share a common note. An awareness that the archive has layers the public will never touch, layers even insiders cannot speak about openly. In their hesitation, in their half-finished sentences, credibility finds its strange anchor. Not in certainty, but in the unmistakable shape of something carefully hidden. To the outside world, the Vatican Library is a scholarly institution. Yet the security measures surrounding its most restricted areas resemble those of a classified military facility. Before a researcher is granted entry, they must undergo intense vetting, academic verification, background checks, personal letters of recommendation. Once inside, even the most trusted scholars are monitored by guards trained not merely in library custodianship, but in protection and containment. Fingerprint scanning, metal detectors, silent cameras tucked into corners, rooms where bags, pens, or even loose sheets of paper are forbidden. Manuscripts brought out only under supervision, counted and recounted before being returned to vaults. These protocols beg a simple but chilling question. How dangerous can paper be? The Church claims the precautions protect fragile documents from theft and damage. Reasonable enough. Yet when combined with rumors of subterranean vaults accessible only to top-ranking officials and biometric doors leading to areas purposely omitted from public maps, the explanation feels incomplete. Documents that are merely old do not require this level of vigilance. Ideas can be dangerous. Some security staff speaking off the record have hinted at protocols that escalate during certain research requests, certain keywords, certain topics. A sudden denial of access without explanation. The suggestion that some manuscripts are treated not just as fragile artifacts, but as classified material. This contrast between a library's exterior calm and the covert infrastructure beneath it raises unsettling possibilities. Perhaps the Vatican guards not only history but narratives, not merely texts, but truths with the power to redefine entire civilizations. And if that is so, then the security is not an overreaction. It is a warning. Among the oldest and most controversial rumors surrounding the Vatican vaults are the whispered tales of manuscripts that challenge the very beginning of our species. These writings, if they exist, claim that humanity's story did not start in the slow crawl from primitive tribes to organized society, but in a moment of intervention. A crossing of paths between early humans and beings whose presence shaped the destiny of the world. They speak of first teachers or shining ones, described in language that wavers between myth and memory. Beings who descended during an age long forgotten, guiding early civilizations with knowledge far beyond their era. Some texts allegedly describe cycles of creation and destruction, epochs where humanity rose to unimaginable heights, only to fall beneath waves of fire, water, or cosmic upheaval. These cycles, according to the legends, were recorded by survivors who believed history would repeat unless their warnings were preserved. Whether written on stone tablets, papyrus scrolls, or metallic plates, these accounts would form a narrative of human origins far more complex than the linear progression taught today. The tone of such manuscripts, as described by those who claim to have heard fragments of their contents, is epic and unsettling. They portray humanity not as a species alone in the universe, but as part of an ancient equation, intertwined with forces older than civilization itself. The Vatican's alleged possession of these texts raises profound questions. Were they preserved because they contain kernels of forgotten truth, or hidden because acknowledging them would unravel not only religious doctrine, but the entire framework of human identity? These stories linger at the edges of credibility, suspended between archaeology and mythology. Yet their persistence hints at something deeper, a collective intuition that our origins may carry echoes far older and far stranger than we dare imagine. Equally mysterious are the rumored ancestral memory maps, charts said to be stored in the Vatican's most inaccessible vaults. These maps, according to legend, trace ancient human migrations along paths that defy mainstream scientific timelines. They depict routes stretching across continents long before those continents were believed to hold advanced cultures, suggesting human civilization is not only older than assumed, but globally interconnected in ways mainstream history cannot explain. Some claim that these maps show coastlines from eras preceding the last ice age, drawn with uncanny precision. Others speak of lines, geometric pathways, linking sacred sites across the world. From the Andes to Mesopotamia, from Egypt to the Pacific Islands. These patterns hint at a shared knowledge system, one that transcended oceans and epochs, preserved by cultures that should never have been in contact with each other. If such maps do exist, they would imply that human memory stretches back far beyond documented history, encoded in traditions that survived through symbols, myths, and sacred architecture. It is no wonder, then, that rumors claim the Vatican guards these charts closely, for they raise a question both monumental and unsettling. What if humanity did not rise from isolated pockets of progress but from a unified ancient past, one whose echoes still ripple through the ruins of forgotten worlds? Imagine for a moment that the sealed doors finally opened, that every hidden manuscript, every forbidden chronicle, every classified map and artifact were released to the world without warning. The effect would not be gradual. It would be instantaneous, like a match thrown into dry forests of belief and identity. Religions would awaken to revelations far older and more complex than their current forms, forced to reinterpret foundational narratives under the weight of newly unearthed truths. Entire doctrines might fracture, expand, or collapse overnight. Scientific paradigms, so carefully constructed across generations, would tremble. If texts emerged describing civilizations before the known timeline, or technologies that should not exist, then the history of human innovation would have to be rewritten from its first chapter. Archaeology, anthropology, cosmology, disciplines built on accumulated certainty, would find their foundations dissolving beneath them. Nations whose identities are tied to singular origin stories might face crises of meaning. Borders drawn from ancient myths could lose their purpose. And yet, amid the chaos, something beautiful might also occur. Humanity could experience its first true moment of collective humility, recognizing that we are part of a story far larger than our current understanding allows. But beauty does not erase shock, nor does wonder prevent upheaval. The sudden revelation of long-hidden truths would ripple across governments, economies, and cultures with unpredictable force. This is the world rewritten, a vision both catastrophic and astonishing. Not destruction, but transformation. Not an ending, but a beginning no civilization has ever been fully prepared to face. The question that lingers beneath every rumor, every locked vault, every forbidden manuscript is deceptively simple. Are we ready to know? Not intellectually, psychologically, spiritually, socially. Humanity has always claimed a desire for truth, yet history shows that truth, when too disruptive, can fracture societies faster than lies ever could. If the Vatican's secrets genuinely hold knowledge that reshapes our past, the shock would extend far beyond academia. Families would question childhood teachings. Faith communities might divide between those who embrace new interpretations and those who cling to old certainties. Political leaders, confronted with revelations that weaken national myths, might fear losing their hold over identity-driven narratives. Even scientists, normally champions of discovery, could struggle to integrate evidence that bends or breaks established laws. The deeper challenge is existential. Truth demands responsibility. If humanity learned that its origins involved cycles of destruction or intervention by unknown intelligences, or forgotten epochs of advanced civilization, the weight of such knowledge could provoke fear instead of enlightenment. Fear breeds instability, and instability in the wrong hands becomes danger. Perhaps this is why the vaults remain closed, not because secrecy is inherently malicious, but because revelation requires readiness. Maybe those who guard these archives believe they are protecting the world, not from knowledge itself, but from its consequences. Or perhaps they fear that once the truth is released, the world we know cannot survive its impact. In this tension between truth and stability lies the heart of the mystery. Humanity desires illumination, yet trembles before the fire that might deliver it. And so the greatest question remains unanswered. Is silence a prison or a shield? In the deepest part of the Vatican's hidden labyrinth, Beyond the catalog shelves and sealed chambers, legends speak of a final door, one that even archivists whisper about only in metaphor. It is said to stand alone in a chamber carved from bedrock, its surface smooth, unmarked, almost impossibly ordinary. No inscriptions, no hinges, no visible lock, just a threshold waiting in eternal silence. Some say it does not open outward or inward, but only when the world itself is ready. Whether this door exists in stone or merely as an idea, it has become a symbol of the greatest mystery of all. For what if the most powerful secret is not a manuscript, nor an artifact, nor a forgotten map, but a shift in understanding, a truth so vast that it cannot be taught, only grown into? Perhaps the Vatican does not guard a revelation. It guards the space in which revelation becomes possible. Throughout history, humanity has always assumed that knowledge is something to be acquired, collected, conquered. But what if some truths require evolution, not discovery? What if the question is not why the door remains closed, but whether we have yet become the kind of species that can cross its threshold without losing ourselves? In this sense, the final secret may protect itself, not through locks or guards or vaults, but through the immaturity of a civilization still learning how to carry truth without weaponizing it. The deeper the knowledge, the more it demands of those who encounter it. And perhaps that is why the greatest mysteries remain hidden, not out of fear, but out of patience. So we return to where we began, standing before a door that does not open, listening to echoes of worlds we may never fully comprehend. Yet the very presence of the unknown invites us forward. It challenges us to expand, to question, to imagine. Because the real secret may not lie behind the final door at all, but in the part of us that still yearns to open it.